The Varkas rain glided silently through the void, its jagged, dark metal hull a perfect reflection of its predator's soul. The ship was not just a weapon, it was a statement. The Zarketh, an ancient race known for their unyielding dominance in the galaxy, had honed their predatory instincts for millennia. For them, fear was an emotion reserved for the weak. They did not flee, they did not retreat, they hunted. It was their nature to be feared, to rule, and to destroy, and the galaxy had learned that lesson well. From the furthest reaches of the Orion Quadrant to the deep fringes of the Andromeda Galaxy, their name echoed as a harbinger of annihilation. No species had ever dared stand against them and survived. But something had changed. Something that neither Krasvex, the ruthless High Warlord, nor his subordinates could fathom. Earth, a world seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of the cosmos, had caught their attention. The Zarketh, ever hungry for new and thrilling challenges, saw the humans as nothing more than a diversion. The Earthlings were weak, primitive. Their technology, crude and inefficient compared to the Zarketh's hyper-advanced weapons and warships, seemed like an easy target. They would feast on Earth's resources, enslave the survivors, and leave behind a barren planet, just another conquest to add to their long list of destroyed civilizations. The Zarketh had underestimated one thing: humanity's capacity to endure, adapt, and above all, to fight. Krasvex stood in his command chamber, staring out through a wall of transparent alloy into the cold, starry expanse. His people had waged wars that spanned generations, hunted entire fleets of civilizations that dared defy them. For centuries they had ruled the galaxy from the shadows, hidden behind their unparalleled strength and cruelty. The concept of failure was foreign to them. But as he observed the transmissions from Earth, something gnawed at the edge of his consciousness. A flicker of doubt. He had initially dismissed it. Humans are just animals, he thought. They cannot even comprehend the true scope of warfare. This will be easy. But as his fleet approached the outskirts of the Martian colonies, and as he saw the first desperate, fragmented resistance broadcasts from Earth, he began to feel something he hadn't felt in ages. A twinge of unease. Humans were not begging for mercy. They were not fleeing. They were organizing. There was an order to their chaos, and when the message from Earth came through, a transmission riddled with static and interference, it hit like a shockwave. "You've taken our outpost," the message declared, static cutting through the audio like shards of broken glass. "Now you deal with what built it." Krasvex's eyes narrowed, his mandibles clicking together in irritation. His subordinates around him did not understand the significance of the message. To them, it was just another threat from a species too weak to back it up. But Krasvex had learned, in the long history of his people's reign, that a species who refused to beg for mercy, who fought with such conviction, was a species worth watching. The Zarketh didn't wait. The command was given, and in an instant, the Varkas rain and its fleet plunged into the heart of the human frontier. The red dust of Mars. The warships, like vultures descending upon their prey, unleashed devastation upon the human colonies, without hesitation. Orbital bombardments obliterated entire cities in a flash. The Martian atmosphere, once thick with the promise of terraforming, turned to ash, burnt under the brutal weight of Zarketh weaponry. Yet, as the carnage unfolded, the Zarketh realized something unexpected. The humans didn't scatter. They didn't crumble under the weight of their enemy's overwhelming strength. They fought back. On Mars, beneath the scorched red sands, Admiral Rhea Solari stood in the command center of Vindicator, humanity's most advanced warship, looking out at a screen that displayed the carnage above. Her hands were steady as she tapped out orders. The Zarketh had underestimated them. They thought they were facing a species of frightened, desperate survivors. What they didn't know was that humanity's greatest strength was not in its weapons, nor its technology, but in its ability to adapt, to overcome, and to innovate on the fly. She tapped her communicator and spoke with a cold calm that belied
the storm raging around her. Initiate Apex Protocol. A brief silence followed.
Then the hum of power coursed through the ship, and the Vindicator's weapon systems roared to life. The Vindicator was not just a ship, it was a weapon forged from desperation and the burning desire to survive. Humanity had been preparing for this moment, for years. Under the cloak of secrecy, Earth's greatest minds had been working on an experimental fleet, an arsenal designed specifically for the unimaginable. Ships that could bend space-time, weapons that could tear through any shield, and technology that had never been seen before. They were humanity's answer to the Zarketh, and they were more than a match for the ruthless predators who had thought themselves invincible. At that moment, the first of the human warships entered the battle, stealthy, almost ghost-like, using cloaking technology far beyond anything the Zarketh had encountered. Human tactics were alien to the Zarketh. They didn't follow the predictable patterns of battle the Zarketh relied upon. Humans used decoys, they intercepted communications, and they adapted mid-fight. Their warships darted across the battlefield, unleashing devastating railgun fire, missiles that tore through the Zarketh's dreadnoughts as though they were made of paper. The Zarketh reacted as they always did, aggressively but predictably. They charged forward, confident in their superior numbers and weaponry, only to find themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. The humans were relentless. Every attack was met with countermeasures. Every Zarketh ship that fell to the Vindicator only served to fuel the humans' rage. Admiral Solari watched as her fleet tore through the Zarketh lines, each ship a testament to humanity's ingenuity. "This is what you get when you underestimate us," she muttered, her eyes steely with resolve. She didn't just want to defeat the Zarketh. She wanted them to remember what it felt like to face a species that would never give up. The Zarketh, though fearsome and deadly, had never faced an enemy like humanity. Their species might have been superior in brute strength and bloodlust. But the humans? They were wild cards. Unpredictable. Dangerous. And in the midst of it all, one truth became undeniable. The Zarketh had made a grave mistake. The hunt had begun, but this time, they were the prey. The battle raged in the cold, unforgiving void of space. Zarketh ships, their obsidian hulls glistening with the starlight, had been hurled into disarray. They were massive, towering warships designed to obliterate entire fleets, their weapons systems capable of destroying planets. But now, they were nothing more than targets, struggling to adapt to the ferocity of humanity's counterattack. The Vindicator and its fleet moved with precision, their dark silhouettes darting in and out of view, as if the very fabric of space itself bent to their will. The human ships had not only evolved technologically but had learned to fight in ways that were unpredictable and brutal, using their environments to their advantage. They knew their enemies' tactics, they knew how the Zarketh fought, what their weaknesses were, and they exploited every one of them. Where the Zarketh relied on overwhelming firepower and intimidation, the humans relied on cunning, strategy, and an undying will to survive. As the Vindicator charged forward, its engines, glowing bright blue with an otherworldly hum, its weapons unleashed a terrifying storm of projectiles. Their kinetic energy cannons fired in rapid succession, sending ripples through the void as bursts of energy collided with the Zarketh's front lines. The Zarketh's massive shields flared with the force of the strikes, but the human weapons were different. They didn't just strike, they calculated, adapting to the Zarketh's shield frequencies and overriding them. With each shot, the shields weakened. Krasvex, aboard the Varkas Rain, was seething. His face, a terrifying array of mandibles and scorn, twisted with fury as he watched his fleet falter. The transmission feeds were filled with screams of his warriors, their last moments spent in agony as they were swallowed by the human onslaught. His mandibles clicked again and again, an expression of frustration building like a storm within him. "Impossible," he growled under his breath. The humans should have crumbled under the weight of his forces, but instead they were fighting like cornered animals, fiercely and without mercy. This was no longer a hunt, it was a war, and the Zarketh were losing. He ordered his warships to regroup and launch a counteroffensive, hoping that sheer numbers would bring victory. The Zarketh had the advantage of numbers, but the humans had something far more dangerous, a sense of unity. They were a species that had spent centuries in a constant state of war, a species that knew the value of survival, of victory at any cost. They fought not just for their own survival, but for the survival of their entire species. As Krasvex's fleet reformed, another unexpected shift occurred. A fleet of human reinforcements, using newly developed jump gates that bent the very fabric of space-time, materialized just outside the battle zone. These ships were unlike anything the Zarketh had ever seen before. Sleek and almost organic in design, they resembled the deep-sea predators of Earth, fast, deadly, and utterly relentless. These were the Scorpions, human warships equipped with cloaking technology far beyond anything the Zarketh had encountered. As they appeared on the battlefield, the Zarketh were caught off guard. The Scorpions moved with terrifying precision, almost like phantoms slipping between the Zarketh's defenses. They struck fast, vanishing before the Zarketh could retaliate. Admiral Solari's voice cut through the chaos. "Prepare for Phase 2, she ordered, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the deadly fury unfolding outside. Her eyes were focused on the holoscreen in front of her, displaying the tactical layout of the battle. The Scorpions were using their advanced cloaking systems, allowing them to weave in and out of the Zarketh's formations with deadly efficiency. It was a new kind of warfare, a fight fought not with strength, but with finesse. A battle of brains over brawn. From the depths of the Zarketh fleet, an enormous ship began to emerge. The Varkas Reign, Krasvex's flagship, had been lying in wait, its cloaking shields momentarily activated to avoid detection. Now, it began to move forward, its immense form like a black leviathan carving through the stars. The ship was a symbol of Zarketh dominance. Its weapons, its defenses, and its sheer size were overwhelming. It was a juggernaut, meant to break fleets, to crush any opposition under its weight. But as the Varkas Reign advanced, the humans did something that stunned Krasvex, something he could not have predicted. They didn't retreat. They didn't cower before the mighty warship. Instead, they attacked. And not just with their ships, but with something far more terrifying. Their AI-driven weapons. The human fleet had integrated advanced artificial intelligence into their systems, allowing them to predict Zarketh movements, counter their tactics, and even reprogram enemy weapons systems. It was a game-changer. The Varkas Reign, with its near-impenetrable shields and devastating firepower, now found itself under siege by its own technology. The AI, designed to be an adaptive force, had learned the Zarketh's fighting style in mere moments, counteracting their weapons and systems with ruthless efficiency. Krasvex watched in horror as his ship's systems began to malfunction. The Varkas Reign's cannons fired wildly, missing their targets as the AI-controlled human warships danced around them, dodging and weaving through the chaos. The Zarketh's once invincible warship was being humbled. It was a moment that would echo through the history of the galaxy. The first time the Zarketh had ever faced a foe that used not just strength, but intellect to wage war. The Zarketh commander snarled in rage, issuing orders to his fleet to fall back. But the damage was done. The humans were no longer on the defensive. With the Varkas Reign reeling, the tide of battle shifted. For the first time in centuries, the Zarketh found themselves on the losing side of a fight, and they didn't know how to react. Back on Earth, Admiral Solari stood before the control panel, her eyes never leaving the view screen. A moment of silence passed as she absorbed the reports from her fleet. They had done it. They had taken the first step in turning the tide. But the war was far from over. The Zarketh were a force unlike any the humans had ever faced. Their cruelty, their strength, it was unmatched. But humanity had something they didn't: the will to fight, to endure, and to protect their home. The Zarketh had made a deadly mistake. They had underestimated Earth. But this was just the beginning. The aftermath of the battle left the galaxy in stunned silence. The Zarketh, once the apex predators of the stars, were now reeling from their first true defeat in centuries. Krasvex, aboard the Varkas Reign, had barely escaped with his life, his once proud warship heavily damaged, a shadow of its former self. The remaining Zarketh fleet had retreated, wounded and disorganized, their plans in ruins. The human forces, though battered, stood victorious. But this victory was not without its cost. Admiral Solari stood at the helm of the Vindicator, gazing out at the remains of the battlefield. The stars flickered as if uncertain of what had just transpired. The wreckage of Zarketh ships floated like broken giants in the vastness of space, their once powerful forms now twisted and charred. Human ships, battered but resolute, circled the debris field, their crews working tirelessly to retrieve valuable data and salvage what they could. But as the Vindicator drifted through the remains of the shattered Zarketh fleet, a sense of unease hung in the air. They had won, yes, but at what cost? The battle had been a victory not just of firepower, but of will, of intellect, and above all, of sheer human determination. However, Solari knew that the Zarketh were not a species that would be easily defeated. If anything, their pride had been wounded, and a wounded predator was always the most dangerous. "Admiral!" A voice crackled through the comms, drawing Solari's attention. It was Captain Rios, her second-in-command. "We've detected Zarketh. Movements in the next sector. They're regrouping, preparing for another strike." Solari's brow furrowed. "How long until they're in range?" "Within hours, Admiral. They've already dispatched their fastest ships ahead. They're looking to hit us hard before we can regroup." It was a terrifying thought. The Zarketh had been forced to retreat, but this was no defeat for them. The predators they were would not bow to this humiliation. And now, they were planning their revenge. Solari knew it was coming. It was only a matter of time before they returned, angrier and more dangerous than before. "We'll be ready," Solari replied, her voice firm. She had no intention of giving the Zarketh the opportunity to rebuild their forces. This battle was not over, not by a long shot. As the fleet prepared for the next engagement, Solari spent the hours reviewing every piece of intelligence gathered during the battle. The human victory had been won through a mix of high-tech warfare, cunning strategy, and the one thing that the Zarketh had underestimated: human adaptability. The AI-driven warships, the Scorpions, had proven their worth, disabling enemy shields, and manipulating Zarketh weaponry. The new cloaking systems had been an unexpected surprise, turning the tides in the humans' favor. But even with these advancements, Solari knew that they had only scratched the surface of what the Zarketh were capable of. Meanwhile, on the Zarketh homeworld, Krasvex seethed with fury. His mandibles clicked in frustration as he paced in the war room of the Varkas Reign, his crew around him, listening intently. The defeat was fresh, raw. He could still hear the screams of his fallen warriors in his mind, the shrill sound of his flagship's dying systems. The humans had struck at the very core of his empire, and they had done it with a ferocity he hadn't expected. But Krasvex was not a leader who could accept defeat. He was a predator. And predators did not just lick their wounds, they hunted. He had underestimated the humans, but he wouldn't make that mistake again. His fleet, though battered, was still formidable, and with the right strategy, he could turn the tables on humanity. "We shall crush them," Krasvex growled to his officers, his voice low and dangerous. "We have the advantage of numbers. We will overwhelm their defenses with a force they cannot match." He began outlining his plan, one that would take the humans by surprise. Instead of attacking head-on, Krasvex decided to use deception, a tactic that the Zarketh had perfected over centuries of conquest. He would feint an attack on one of humanity's colonies, drawing their forces away from the true target. Then, when they were spread thin, he would strike the heart of their fleet. The humans had proven themselves formidable, but Krasvex believed that they could be outmaneuvered. However, unbeknownst to him, the humans had already begun to adapt in ways that would have been unimaginable to any other species. Their strategy was evolving, growing more complex with each engagement. They were learning, not just from their successes, but from their failures. And with every new tactic they deployed, the Zarketh found themselves at a greater disadvantage. Bax. On Earth, the human leadership was preparing for the next phase of the war. They knew that the Zarketh would not rest. They would come again, harder and faster. But the humans had something that the Zarketh lacked: unity. It wasn't just a matter of advanced technology or military might. The humans were fighting for their home, for their families, for their future, and that made them unstoppable. Admiral Solari and her team were already planning the next move. They knew they had to strike first. The Zarketh had a tendency to play the long game, to wait for the perfect moment to strike. But the humans had no intention of waiting. The Vindicator was already being upgraded with even more advanced weapon systems, and new ships were being brought online every day. The war wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about taking the fight to the Zarketh and finishing it. But Solari couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play here than just a battle between two species. The Zarketh were not like any other race they had encountered before. Their cruelty, their savagery, It wasn't just a part of their nature. It was their way of life. And the humans, for all their strength, had just begun to understand what that truly meant. As the Vindicator jumped into the next sector, preparing to face the Zarketh once more, Solari's thoughts turned to the future. What would it take to finally defeat the Zarketh? Could humanity rise to the challenge, or would the predators of the stars destroy them, as they had done to so many others before? One thing was certain. This war was far from over. It was only just beginning. And the true cost of victory was yet to be revealed. The silence of space had always been a deceiving comfort. For the inhabitants of humanity's fleet, the calm before, the storm was always the most oppressive moment. They had survived the Zarketh's first wave, but the predators were not finished. Far from it. Their new strategy, subtle, deceptive, and deadly, was about to put the human forces to the ultimate test, and this time, the humans had underestimated the Zarketh in ways they could not yet comprehend. Admiral Solari stood in the command deck of the Vindicator, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the vast expanse of space through the viewport. The stars twinkled in the distance, distant and cold. Her mind, however, was far from serene. Intelligence had confirmed what she had feared. The Zarketh were preparing a massive ambush, one that would catch humanity off guard. They were already on the move, slipping through the shadows of space like the predators they were. The humans had learned from their previous encounters, yes. But this time, the Zarketh would learn from their mistakes too. The Zarketh had adapted. Their fleets had been scattered and broken, but they were regrouping, refining their tactics, and preparing for a strike. The humans had caught a glimpse of their cunning, but they had no idea how much worse it would get. The Zarketh had a way of shifting their fleet into the most unlikely formations, moving like a swarm of predators hunting a single prey. No longer would they approach head-on, like the bloodthirsty savages they were. Now, they would stalk their prey in silence, each strike more precise, more deadly than the last. Admiral Solari had every intention of putting up a fight, but even she could feel the weight of the knowledge pressing on her. No amount of high-tech weaponry or human ingenuity could change the fact that the Zarketh were formidable in a way no other species had ever been. They were not just warriors, they were conquerors, relentless and unstoppable. But the humans had learned something crucial from their victory. The Zarketh were predators, yes, but they had no concept of the kind of desperation that fueled humanity's will to survive. "Admiral, we're detecting a massive fleet emerging from the nebula," Captain Rios's voice came through, urgent and steady. "It's them. The Zarketh." A chill ran down Solari's spine. The nebula was a perfect hiding place, its dense clouds of gas and dust providing the perfect cover for an ambush. It was a classic Zarketh tactic. They had lured them into a false sense of security, only to spring the trap when humanity's fleet was too far into the sector to retreat. The Zarketh were masters of psychological warfare, and now they would pay the price for underestimating humanity's resolve. "We need to move," Solari ordered, her voice firm. "Deploy the Scorpions immediately. Initiate evasive maneuvers. For the entire fleet. I won't let them catch us off guard." The crew scrambled to carry out her orders, a well-oiled machine in the face of imminent danger. The Vindicator's engines hummed as the ship powered up, its advanced thrusters pushing it into motion as the battle sensors lit up with incoming targets. The Zarketh had already begun to spread their fleet across the sector, moving into striking formation. Their massive warships, equipped with devastating plasma cannons and hull-crushing weaponry, loomed on the sensors like ominous giants. Human forces, on the other hand, had to rely on a new strategy: speed, maneuverability, and above all unpredictability. The Vindicator was equipped with cloaking technology, a weapon that had proven to be a game-changer. It could slip through enemy radar undetected, striking with pinpoint precision and retreating before the enemy could retaliate. The human fleet was not as powerful as the Zarketh's, but it was far more agile. And, Solari hoped, that would be enough. "Admiral!" Rios's voice came again, this time with more urgency. "The Zarketh are splitting their forces. It's a distraction. One half of their fleet is feinting a move toward the outer colonies, drawing us away from the real target. They're going for the heart of our fleet." Solari's heart sank. The Zarketh were already playing their psychological game, hoping to stretch humanity's forces thin. But this time, Solari wasn't going to fall for it. "Deploy a counterstrike," she barked. "Rios, you're with me. We're hitting their command ship. Take out the head, and the body will fall. We need to end this now." The plan was risky. Very risky. But in this war, risks were the only thing that could ensure survival. If they struck at the Zarketh's command ship, it would disrupt their coordination and create chaos in their ranks. The human forces would be able to retaliate with more precision, cutting down the Zarketh's advantage before it could fully materialize. The Vindicator cut through the stars, flanked by a squadron of human warships that had been quickly scrambled for the attack. The Zarketh's decoy fleet made the move toward the colonies as expected. But Solari wasn't fooled. She watched as her fleet closed in on the Zarketh's command ship, a massive vessel hovering just outside the core of their fleet. The ship was a behemoth, an ancient war machine that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Its sleek black surface was covered in jagged markings, signs of the countless battles it had fought and survived. To the Zarketh, it was the embodiment of their power. To Solari, it was the heart of the storm. The humans were closing in fast now, and the Zarketh didn't see it coming. The Vindicator dropped its cloaking, unleashing a barrage of precision-targeted missiles that tore through the Zarketh command ship's shields. The explosion was deafening, a bright flash of light as the first salvo made impact. The Zarketh command ship rocked under the assault, its weapons fire going wild as it lost control of its systems. But as the Vindicator's weapons kept firing, an unexpected turn of events unfolded. From within the shattered core of the Zarketh command ship, a second, hidden fleet emerged, far larger than expected. The Zarketh were not retreating, they were amplifying their attack, now with a far more overwhelming force. "Get us out of here, now!" Solari ordered, her voice tight with realization. The humans were walking into the jaws of an even larger trap than they had anticipated. The Vindicator shook under the barrage of plasma and laser fire as Solari gripped the console, her knuckles white. The Zarketh's hidden fleet, an unexpected second wave, had erupted from the depths of the ambush, and humanity's forces were now caught between two overwhelming threats. The Zarketh had anticipated this. They knew the human fleet would come for their command ship, and they had been waiting, biding their time and setting the perfect trap. Now, the Zarketh were circling like sharks, and the human forces were surrounded. "Status report!" Solari's voice was calm, but her heart raced with the realization that their entire strategy was slipping through her fingers. "Shields at 42%, Captain Rios replied, his voice strained. "We've lost 3 cruisers. The Arctic is already down, and the Cobalt is barely holding its position. The enemy fleet is closing in. Reinforcements are still half a sector away." "Not good enough," Solari muttered. But as her eyes scanned the tactical readouts, something in her shifted. A plan formed in her mind, desperate, reckless, but, if executed perfectly, it might just be their salvation. The Zarketh had underestimated one thing: the unpredictability of humanity's will to fight, to adapt, to survive. Her voice was resolute. "We're not running! Rios, I need you to initiate a warp jump, not out of the sector, into the heart of their fleet." There was a stunned silence on the bridge. Rios blinked, disbelief flickering across his face. "Admiral, that's suicide. A warp jump that close to the enemy fleet? We'll be torn apart before we even make the jump." "We don't have a choice," Solari responded coldly. "Either we make it into their heart, disrupt their formation, and tear apart their command from the inside, or we die here." Her words hung in the air like a battle cry. The crew was tense, but there was no hesitation in their faces. The humans had always known that there were no easy victories, only choices, and this was the final one. They would fight until the end or not at all. Rios swallowed, looking at the glowing holographic interface. Initiating warp jump. Now. The ship's engines roared to life, its dark matter drives humming with impossible power. The Vindicator lurched forward, and in that moment, the universe seemed to bend. A sudden, blinding flash engulfed the ship as it tore through space at a speed faster than light. The Zarketh fleet, though closing in with a relentless tide of firepower, couldn't stop what was about to happen. In the blink of an eye, the Vindicator reappeared within the heart of the Zarketh fleet. The human warship, its weapons primed and ready, emerged like a ghost into the chaos of the Zarketh's own ranks. The Zarketh commanders had no time to react. The Vindicator had arrived with shocking precision, and for a brief moment, the Zarketh were disoriented. But humanity was not finished. Solari's orders were simple, but deadly. Target the Zarketh fleet's central command node. Break their communications, shatter their control. The Vindicator's massive cannons roared to life, unleashing hell upon the unsuspecting Zarketh warships. Missiles tore through shields, and energy blasts rained down upon enemy cruisers, causing massive explosions. The Vindicator moved like a predator itself, striking with precision and disappearing in a flash as the Zarketh scrambled to respond. The human fleet, seeing the devastation being wrought upon the Zarketh's command structure, launched their own counteroffensive. They had been holding back, waiting for the right moment. Now, with their forces spread thin, humanity struck with everything they had. Even as human ships were destroyed in the chaos, they fought on, relentless. But the turning point came when a team of human marines, aboard their stealth craft, infiltrated the wreckage of a Zarketh command ship that had been crippled by the Vindicator's bombardment. They stormed the control room, facing the Zarketh's elite warriors in a brutal, close-quarters battle. The humans were outnumbered, but their ferocity, their will to survive, overcame the Zarketh's superior strength. One by one, the Zarketh commanders were slain, their hold on their fleet slipping. In the midst of the carnage, Admiral Solari's voice came through once more, steady and commanding. "We've broken their command. Take them down. All ships, full assault." The Zarketh fleet, once a terrifying force of ruthless efficiency, was now in disarray. Without their leadership, their fleet scattered in panic, each ship retreating, some even firing upon each other in confusion. The tides of war had shifted in humanity's favor. But there was one final blow to be dealt. As the Zarketh tried to retreat, the human forces closed in for the kill. The Vindicator, its hull battered but still standing, launched its final assault, a coordinated strike from every surviving ship. The explosion that followed was a beacon of victory, a moment of triumph that echoed across the galaxy. Admiral Solari watched the Zarketh fleet disintegrate into the void, the once feared predators now reduced to nothing more than fragments floating in the dark. It was a battle that had cost them dearly, a war that had stretched their resources to the breaking point. But humanity had won, against all odds, and they had shown the galaxy that they were no longer just a species to be underestimated. As the debris of the Zarketh ships drifted through space, Solari allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. They had fought tooth and nail to secure this victory. They had survived the impossible, and against a species that once terrified the galaxy, they had emerged victorious. But the war was not over. Humanity had proven that they could take on any foe, no matter how fierce, no matter how predatory. And as the stars continued to burn in the distance, humanity's resolve burned just as brightly. The Zarketh had been defeated, but they were not the last challenge the human race would face. Not by a long shot. There were many more threats in the darkness of space, many more predators lying in wait, but humanity's survival instincts had just been proven stronger than anyone had ever imagined. This wasn't just the end of a battle. It was a declaration. Humanity had come to play in the galactic theater, and anyone who underestimated them would soon feel the full force of what it meant to face a species that had nothing left to lose. As the Vindicator drifted away from the wreckage, Solari looked toward the stars. The war was far from over. But humanity had just sent a message that would be heard across the galaxy. The Zarketh had learned a harsh truth. They were no longer the predators. Humanity had just become the apex hunter. If you enjoyed this thrilling tale of survival, intergalactic warfare, and human resilience, make sure to like and share this video. Leave a comment below to tell us what you think about humanity's place in the galaxy, and how you would survive against the galaxy's fiercest predators.